just in Connecticut. Better state right now. Sorry. I'm Chad Bailey from Holdridge, Nebraska, and these will be your Unit 1 judges, so good luck.
Great.
Good afternoon.
You may be seated.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Gass. I'm director of the Center for School Reform at Pioneer Institute. It's a Boston-based think tank that does research around K-12 education reform. It's a larger room. We got a good number of people here, so I'm going to tell both the judges and you folks to make sure you use a kind of louder voice so the people way back can hear, and especially if the air conditioning comes on. So.
Good afternoon. I'm Jane Warren. I'm an attorney in Massachusetts, and I also teach at Bristol Community College, so welcome and congratulations.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Murphy. I work at the University of Chicago in the Continuing Ed division, doing civic education programs and teaching a little history as well.
Maybe you can introduce yourselves and your teacher.
Hello, I'm Garrett Harrison.
Good afternoon, I'm Stephen Lang,
My name is Trevor Hewins.
and we represent Unit 1 from Fort Thomas, Kentucky, and our teacher is Miss Megan Boimann-Hennies.
Great.
Nice
Thank
to
you so
meet
much for
you.
your work.
Thank you.
So this is Unit 1. We'll be addressing question 2 this afternoon, and I'll read all of the Unit 1 questions and all of question 2. Unit 1, what are the philosophical and historical foundations of the American political system? Question 2, our system of government is based on both natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism. Which philosophy, if any, has predominated American political thought, and what have been the benefits and costs of this predominance? What examples of contemporary issues can you describe that reflect the tension between classical Republican ideas and those of natural rights philosophy? What position would you take on which of the philosophies, if either, should prevail? Explain what principles and values underlie your position. Timer, you may begin.
As James Madison asserted in Federalist 57, the aim of every political constitution is to obtain for rulers who possess most wisdom to discern and most virtue to pursue the common good of society, and to take most effectual precautions for keeping them virtuous while as they continue to hold their public trust.
Natural rights philosophy argues that the purpose of government is to protect the people's inalienable rights of life, liberty, and property, as influenced by John Locke. Contrastly, classical Republican philosophers like Aristotle state that the purpose of the people is to act out of the betterment of the state and to promote the common good of the community. Although the framers and founders attempted to implement both philosophies, this panel argues that natural rights philosophy has predominated American political thought.
For example, early colonial charters, such as the Carolina Charter, protected Lockean unalienable rights, which included ideas of common law and security of one's property. Moreover, several early state constitutions, like Virginia, adopted bills of rights affirming natural rights and popular sovereignty.
Likewise, the Declaration of Independence proclaimed that equality of all men was a self-evident truth, which parallels Locke's argument in the Second Treatise of Civil Government, which states that men being, as had been said by nature, all free, equal, and independent. The Declaration also reinforces Locke's support for a right to revolution in the instance where such rights are violated through the list of grievances. During the 20th century, attempts to protect natural rights has continued with the passage of legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990.
However, this panel asserts the Constitution is more predominated by classical Republican thought than natural rights philosophy. This is evident in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, which states, representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers, which shows the emphasis being put in the power over the whole country instead of the individual.
Classical republicanism can be beneficial, as seen through FEMA support following the September 11th attacks, which helped provide aid for victims and their families and infrastructure repair. Classical republicanism can be potentially dangerous, as seen through Japanese internment, which was strengthened by Korematsu v. U.S., which established the idea that the nation could sacrifice the individual rights of the minority in order to preserve the security of the majority.
There are many contemporary examples that show the conflict between the importance of the common good as seen through classical republicanism conflicting with the importance of personal liberties as prescribed by natural rights philosophy.
More recently, a chickenpox outbreak in Kentucky High School in our region demonstrates the difficulty in balancing these two philosophies. Parents at Assumption High School are protesting the Northern Kentucky Health Department's decision to ban students without the chickenpox vaccine from participation in classroom extracurricular activities.
While the Health Department's decision reflects the protection of public health and the common good, some families cite First Amendment religious freedoms as justification for not vaccinating their children. It is this panel's assertion that in this case, the safety for the students attending the school, the idea of classical Republican value of general welfare should be used. While this panel recognizes the importance of the right to religious freedom, this panel asserts that the safety of the students comes first.
As Founding Father Thomas Jefferson stated, natural rights are the objects of the protection of which society is formed and municipal laws established. This panel asserts that without natural rights, the state would become too powerful and the rights of the individuals would be completely disregarded. However, we acknowledge the necessity of balance between natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism.
We feel this balance is necessary because if the two were equally reflected, then not only would we have basic representation for an individual, but the betterment of the community as a whole. This can be exemplified with the Brandenburg test, which protects the natural right of free speech while protecting Republican values by prohibiting speech on such imminent lawless action. Thank you. We will now take your questions.
Great,
Thank you.
So my colleagues and I will have some follow-up questions, and I'll begin. The 1830s French commentator Alexis de Tocqueville said that local civic organizations and religious institutions are the wellspring of American liberty. Are civic organizations an example of classical republicanism or natural rights philosophy?
I would argue that they are more of a classical Republican idea because a key pillar of classical Republican ideas is civic virtue and civic education. This is most directly derived from Aristotle's idea of republicanism, and civic councils promoting civic education and whatnot are a direct stem from classical republicanism.
What might the consequences to a society be if the ideas of either classical republicanism or natural rights philosophy were to be taken to the extreme?
In regards to classical republicanism going too far, we would see a severe decrease in personal liberties, and we might even see something akin to fascism or totalitarianism. So if people act purely out of the betterment of the state, then people's rights are completely disregarded.
With my colleague, if natural rights were to be emphasized too hard, then that could take less of the focus on protecting the country as a whole, which could leave us open to harm in different ways.
I have a question, and it's not a challenge to what you said, it's a clarification. At the beginning, you said the panel asserts that natural rights philosophy has sort of dominated the course of American history, but the Constitution itself, it's classical republicanism that dominates. So could you give some examples of how over the course of the 200 years history of the United States that natural rights philosophy, like where do they come from? Where do the impetus come from to sort of pull the Constitution away from its origins and more towards protection of individual rights?
Well, the expansion of these rights, such as the expansion of suffrage to many groups that didn't initially have the right to vote, such as women, African Americans, and people under the age of 21. With all those certain amendments have given us much more of a push in the natural rights direction rather than the initial view.
We see influence from the colonies. They see themselves victims of tyranny by the English king and parliament by not being represented, and severe taxes on them. They wish to prevent further tyranny after they declare independence, and they see a clear way to prevent that tyranny is to promote civic education, civic virtue, and the common good of the community. And they take direct influence from those Greek and Roman ideas, and they put that into the Constitution.
Under our form of government, K-12 public education is largely the constitutional jurisdiction of state and local governments. What are some of the historical and philosophical roots of American federalism, that balance between state and federal authority?
The founders and framers both took direct influence from Greco-Roman statesmen like Cincinnatus in terms of virtue, and Aristotle and Cicero from Greece. So they wish to take those virtues and implement them into the Constitution in their form of government.
you can see them attempt to balance these classical Republican ideas with the natural rights one, with the creation of the Bill of Rights that the Anti-Federalists thought were vital to the institution of the country.
How, if at all, is the right to the pursuit of happiness contained in the Declaration of Independence related to classical republicanism or natural rights philosophy?
We see the pursuit of happiness as regarding individual liberties by yielding anyone within the country to pursue what they want as long as it is legal. So it takes both influence from natural rights as Lockean natural rights of life, liberty, and property, and protecting those so that one can attain what they wish to do.
Looking at contemporary politics, the two major political parties, do you think one party leans toward more natural rights versus classical republicanism? And same question for the other party.
I think we can see that the Republican Party can lean more towards the classical Republican idea, especially with the debate over firearms. And I meant to say natural rights, as in that they believe that's somebody's natural right to protect and preserve themselves, and they cite the Second Amendment, while the Democratic Party is much more pushing the opposite of that we need to restrict it to better our community.
We also see that the Republican Party primarily would like to promote classical Republican ideas regarding immigration and national security. We see that through President Trump's policies restricting more immigration. We also see that earlier in the 21st century regarding the Patriot Act and curbing someone's natural rights in order to prevent terrorism.
Good job.
So first of all, I want to thank your teacher and parents and you for all of your hard work. This is difficult material. I think you handled it in your introductory remarks very nicely. I think that the variety of different references that you made to the civil rights movement in 1964 and September 11th, the case of the chickenpox vaccines in your own state. You did a good job of sort of articulating and giving examples of that tension and that balance. And I think you did a good job of explaining that balance. You carried that forward, I think, in the Q&A period too. I think you did an excellent job of explaining how classical republicanism gone too far can lead to things like totalitarianism and fascism. Sometimes people come up with simple solutions and don't realize that the consequence could be something quite horrifying. And I thought you did an excellent job on my question about federalism, which is a thorny question within a thorny question. And I thought the reference to the anti-federalist was spot on. That's really, really well done. So thank you for your work. Appreciate it a ton.
I agree with my colleague. I think you had a very strong opening. I think you've done a really good job with a very difficult question. We all agree that it is a difficult question, but you showed that you had a knowledge of the Virginia Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. You mentioned all of these. What happened after 9/11, giving up rights as, with respect to like the Patriot Act and so forth. And then I thought you were correct in your assessment about the Republican Party view and the Democratic Party view. So, it is a tough topic, so I think you did a really, really good job. So.
Yeah, I think you guys did a stellar job. I like hearing conflict, difficult questions, balance, because these aren't black and white, even though some of the questions try to force you in that direction. My question about contemporary politics, you started off by saying the Republicans might be more natural rights, but then you came back and said, well, it's actually classical republicanism too, and that shows a good deference to how nuanced all this is, and I think you guys handle it very well. We can't score on style points, but I like your guys' style too. I wouldn't want to play poker against you guys. But you clearly know your stuff, and that was all very impressive all the way down. Great job, guys.